Hello, my name is Faisal Fasi. I teach in West Bengal National University of Juridical Sciences, that is NUJS. The topic is right of private defense. The state is under a constitutional obligation to protect our life, liberty and property. However, it is not feasible for the state to fulfill this obligation at each and every moment of our lives, mainly due to lack of resources. So we are left with two options, retreat or repel. The rule of retreat signifies that one should try to get away from the place of assault to the place of safety, rather than causing injury to the aggressor. On the other hand, rule of repel expects the victim to repel aggression by aggression. In the earlier times, rule of retreat was in vogue, but the modern criminal policy is to encourage the rule of repel. The state confers right of self-defense or private defense on individual for ensuring that the individual can perform its duty of protecting himself and others from wrongdoer. In fact, it has been laid down by the Honorable Supreme Court of India on several occasions that running away from danger is dishonorable to human soul. Section 96 to 106 of the Indian Penal Code deal with the principle of private defense. The principle of general exceptions or defenses, including private defense, which are stated in IPC, are not only applicable for offences covered under it, but also apply for other penal laws of the country. Penal laws may be classified into three broad categories. Number one, general penal laws deal with various categories of offences which are applicable throughout the country, such as Indian Penal Code. Number two, special penal laws deal with particular subject matter such as Arms Act and local laws which are applicable within the limit of a particular territory. At the outset, we have to note that the term private defense or self-defense is a misnomer because, as said, the right is not confined to just protecting oneself from danger, but apply for the protection of others as well. Issues broadly can be classified into two. Number one, determination of the right and the limitation of the right. Actually, the first issue is connected with the second because limitation includes situations where the right is not available. However, for the sake of clarity, I have classified the issues into two. Number one, nature of the right. The first issue, that is nature of the right, is to understand that what exactly is this right all about. The most important principle for me is to appreciate that it is not a punitive right in the sense a person uses it for the purpose of taking revenge from the wrongdoer. To give a very simple example, imagine that a person without carrying any arms tries to apprehend a group of 20 people. Now, in normal circumstance, these 20 people cannot use force against this individual wrongdoer, because there can't be any apprehension on the part of this 20. On the contrary, if these 20 people beat the wrongdoer, that would be an offense, even though the victim was initially the culprit. Ideally, the wrongdoer may be handed over to the police. In short, private defense is a defensive or preventive right and not to be applied for taking revenge or a shield to commit an offense. In the state of Lakshman Sahu versus the state of Odisha, the Supreme Court has said that private defense is available only to one who is suddenly confronted with immediate necessity of averting an impending danger and not his creation. The second point is mere apprehension is sufficient to apply private defense. It is not necessary that the offense must take place for triggering private defense. Rather, mere apprehension that the offense is likely to be committed is sufficient. A person should not wait until the aggressor has actually started to use force. For example, say a person is carrying a gun or an iron rod and threatens to use it, thereby creating a situation where the victim is in fear of injury or death. At this moment, private defense can be used. Thus, private defense commences on mere apprehension. Test of private defense. Private defense commences as soon as apprehension or assault commences and ends as soon as apprehension ends. However, at times it becomes very difficult to assess whether the victim was exercising the right or using it as a shield to cause excessive harm to the wrongdoer. It is a question of fact, which means each case should be determined as per the given facts and circumstances. One of the best methods is to put oneself in the position of the person who claimed to have exercised private defense and to check whether he went with the flow of the instinct for self-preservation or whether he was acting under malice or ill will. Imagine that I have ill will against Mr. X and wanted to cause injury to him. Say we are walking down the public road and taking the opportunity of crowded place, he pushed me deliberately and walked away. But it was a kind of gentle push by which I hardly experienced any pain. Now, if I chase him and give couple of punches under the guise of private defense, it may not be justified because when I applied force, I had no apprehension of further harm from him. If at all I was hurt from the behavior of Mr. X, I had an option of informing the public authority that I didn't like the behavior of Mr. X. Coming to subject matter of private defense does not arise out of any wrongful or unlawful act. It is available in situations related to offense against human body, such as in a situation of apprehension of injury, death, sexual assault, etc., and 4 offenses relating to property, namely theft, robbery, mischief, and criminal trespass. Thus, a person cannot exercise private defense in offenses relating to cheating, breach of trust, misappropriation, decency, morality, and other subject matter of crime. Now, the person who are entitled for private defense is available for one's own protection as well as for protecting others, including strangers. As I said before, that the term private defense is a misnomer. Now, there may be a situation where both the sides claim private defense. So, this becomes a very tricky question in the court of law. Both the side means prosecution as well as defense. In this situation, the court takes a call by analyzing the circumstantial evidence if direct evidence is not available. Circumstantial evidence includes the background of the actors, nature of the weapon use, manner of assault, including number of assault, place of assault, and other relevant circumstances. In this regard, analysis of injury may provide important clue in unearthing the truth. Generally, if a person fails to provide satisfactory explanation of injury, the other side gets the benefit. Some of the guiding principles are: number 1, generally a presumption is not raised for private defense if some injuries are present in the body of the accused. The defense has to establish it by adducing evidence. The prosecution case may or may not be affected for failure to provide cogent explanation of injury. Generally, the prosecution case is not affected if the injury is of superficial nature, but it may assume importance in the genesis and manner of occurrence if it is of serious nature. In the latter situation, I should say, the case may be decided in favor of the defense. The failure to explain injuries is significant if the evidence is provided by interested witness, that is, one who is related to the party. The improper testimony for explanation of injury is relevant when the version provided by defense is in contradiction with the version of the prosecution. The defense may get a benefit if both the parties are injured and both of them are trying to suppress the genesis of the incident. Further, non-explanation of injuries need to be weighed along with other materials to see whether the prosecution version is reliable, cogent, and trustworthy. While considering the legitimacy of private defense, the court will not consider the situation of the victim that he was in a position to inflict more harm than he caused to the initial aggressor. Regarding burden of proving private defense, the court presumes the absence of private defense. So, the burden of proof lies on the person who wishes to take the benefit of private defense. Regarding the standard of proof, the requirement is to prove a criminal case, it should be beyond reasonable doubt. But if a person wants to take benefit of exceptions, including private defense, the standard is relaxed and proving a case by mere preponderance of probability is sufficient. It simply means that on the balance of probability, he is having a better case than the other side. In other words, a person will be acquitted if reasonable doubt is created in the mind of the court about his guilt. Further, court can provide the benefit of private defense on its own motion. A person cannot be denied of the benefit of private defense merely because he failed to plead it or took a different line of defense during the trial due to lack of awareness of private defense or failure to understand that private defense could be a valid exception. For example, if an accused took the plea of alibi and he could not succeed in it, still the court can give the benefit of private defense if it appears from the material on record. If the evidence adduced by the prosecution indicates that he was put under a situation where he could reasonably have apprehended danger to the body. The crucial factor is not what accused pleaded, but whether he had the case to reasonably apprehend danger to body or property. Now, person against whom private defense is exercised. Private defense is available against all kinds of aggressors, including those who are not inherently capable of forming bad intention due to tender age or insanity, and also against those capable of forming such evil intention but due to misconception of fact or acting under the influence of voluntary intoxication. Now, to take an example, under section 98 illustration A of IPC, Z under the influence of madness attempts to kill A. Z is guilty of no offence, but A has the same right of private defense which he would have if Z were sane. The second illustration narrates a situation whereby A enters by night a house which he is legally entitled to enter. Z in good faith, taking A for the housebreaker, attacks A. Here Z, by attacking A under the misconception, commits no offence, but A has the same right of private defense against Z which he would have if Z were acting under that misconception. Now, coming to limitations of private defense is not absolute right and subjected to certain restriction. There are two questions to ponder here. Number one, whether private defense is available at all. If yes, what are the various limitations? So, limitations are: number one, end of apprehension, end of private defense. That means private defense commences as soon as apprehension commences, it ends as soon as apprehension ends. Take an example, say Mr. X, having malice to cause injury to Mr. Y, reaches his house with hockey stick to beat him. He is abusing and threatening Mr. Y. Imagine that Mr. Y is in company of his 10 friends, and having realized the presence of 10 people, Mr. X has started to run away. In this scenario, Mr. Y cannot chase and beat Mr. X under the pretext of private defense, because the moment Mr. X started to run away, private defense ends as apprehension is over. Thus, the apprehension should be real and it should not be too remote, right? Further, to avail private defense of property, a person should be in settled possession of the property, that is, clear and effective possession of a person. It is interesting to note that even a trespasser may have a settled possession. The Supreme Court has laid down the following criteria in the case of Puran Singh versus the state of Punjab, that is case of Supreme Court 1975, which may entitle a trespasser to exercise the private defense of the property and person. The situation are: the trespasser had intention to possess, followed by an actual possession, settled possession over a long period. The growing of crops by the trespasser in a cultivable land is one of the tests to determine settled possession. Second, true owner is aware of such possession. Third, true owner is completely dispossessed from the property. There are other principles which the court has laid down from time to time in a lot of cases, say for example, Parasram versus Rex and Ambika Singh versus the state. The criteria are: number one, it is the settled law that the trespasser acquires the right to defend his possession against physical attack only if he has come to it by the express or implied consent of the true owner, and his possession has become peaceful and settled. The passage of time does not necessarily confer any right on the trespasser. Now, take an example. A man may be away when another takes forcible possession of his property behind his back, and on his return he can assert his right of property by throwing out the trespasser. The question of lapse of time becomes relevant only if the rightful owner or occupier sits quiet and does nothing to assert his rights, even after knowing that the trespasser is in possession. Second point is, private defense of property is available to a trespasser only against some act of the rightful occupier, which amounts to theft, robbery, mischief, or criminal trespass, or any attempt to commit any of these four crimes. But if the rightful owner somehow resumes the possession of his own land in the absence of the trespasser, he commits no crime, and trespasser on his return cannot invoke the private defense to remove the rightful owner, because he is no more on the possession of the property, which is essential for exercising private defense. So, the principle here is that private defense of property is available for the possession of the property and not the ownership. Point number 3, if the question is of infringement of enjoyments of one's rights, such as in case of nuisance, generally private defense is not available. Recourse should be taken to public authority, right? Point number 4, when fight takes place in an open field, not on or near the property to be protected, but far away from it, this fight cannot be said to be won for the protection of the property, and there will be no private defense. To sum up, the true owner should act at and during the time when the trespasser is trying to trespass, but once the latter settles in the property of the former, possession can be restored by only taking recourse to the authority as per the provision of the law. In the case of Munshi Ram versus Delhi administration, that is 1968 case, a person was in settled possession of a piece of evacuee land which was sold in the public auction. The certificate of sale was issued to the highest bidder. The requirement of law was that the purchaser of land was supposed to follow certain procedure for getting the possession of land. In the instant case, the purchaser wanted to enter the land without complying with such formalities. The court held that the accused had private defense. Similarly, if you look at case of Ram Ratan versus State, a person encroached upon a public land which was meant for common enjoyment and establishment, then established a possession for a couple of weeks. Now, Supreme Court held that he had right to defend against true owner as well as member of public trying to secure possession out of his own possession. So, one should differentiate between maintenance of right and enforcement of right. Second point is offender has succeeded in his retreat. Private defense to defend the property comes to an end if the offender manages to escape with the property. It will depend upon the facts and circumstances of the given case. When the offender has been chased up to his house, in that event, the pursuer shall not have right of forceful entry in the offender's house. The offender shall be taken to have successfully effected his retreat, and the private defense comes to an end. The victim actually should take recourse to the public authority because he knows the person who is the offender, which is also a check on the private defense. The third limitation is time to take recourse to public authority. So, it means private defense does not exist if there is a time to take recourse to the public assistance or public authority. The rationale is that private defense should be used as a last resort and to repel imminent danger when it is not possible to take the help of the state. So, gross misuse of private defense may be checked. So, the law insists that the first opportunity should be given to the public authority to tackle the situation. The availability of time is a crucial test. Now, take an example. If a trespasser occupy a vacant field, but there is no imminent danger of harm to anyone, the lawful possessor of land should ideally take the assistance of public authority in removing the trespasser, rather than fighting with him straight away. The gravity of the threatened harm is not relevant, but the nature of the threat or apprehension is the decisive factor. Point number 4, private defense is not available if property has been recovered. For example, if a thief runs away while throwing away or leaving the stolen property, the private defense ceases and the owner of the property has no right to proceed with violence against the thief. Rule number 5, which is most important, rule of proportionality. The force used for exercising private defense should not be out of the proportion. The general principle is that private defense should not exceed to causing more harm than required for the purpose of defending or preventing harm. Now, take an example. Say Mr. X slapped Mr. Y and the latter shot the former. This is clearly out of proportionality, and hence Mr. Y is not entitled for any defense. In this context, the issue is how to determine the proportionality in the given situation. Whether it is based on mathematical precision or nearly fulfilling the requirement of proportionality is sufficient for availing the exemption. In the earlier example, imagine that instead of shooting Mr. Y slapped X twice. Whether Mr. Y will get an exemption or will be held responsible because he slapped twice in return of one slapping of similar nature. In this kind of scenario, generally benefit is given to the person who exercised private defense. It has been provided in series of cases that the objective of private defense is to serve a social purpose and should be interpreted liberally in favor of the accused. Now, two relevant considerations in this regard are, which is worthy of noting, is number 1, subjectivity. The case should not be decided from the perspective of objective standard of a person who has not faced a situation of imminent danger. A case should always be judged from the perspective of accused while he was facing the danger. And second is pragmatism. A situation should be assessed pragmatically and not with the help of microscopic view to detect marginal overstepping. Some of the relevant factors which may be considered are normal human reaction or conduct, human error, self-preservation instinct, access to thing in the ordinary course of transaction, and capacity of the person in question. Take a case of Yogendra Morarji versus State of Gujarat. What happened in the case, a dispute arose over a payment of dues. The accused was driving jeep. The victim stopped the jeep of the accused in the middle of the road and started pelting stones. In return, the accused fired thrice, causing death of the victim. Two contentions were raised in the case. Number 1, whether private defense was available at all. If yes, whether causing death was justified. The Supreme Court held the moment the jeep was stopped, the accused had apprehension of physical harm, but not to the extent of death or grievous injury, as he was inside the closed vehicle. Similarly, if you take the case of Cherubin Gregory versus the state of Bihar, in that case, the public used to access the private toilet in spite of regular warning from the owner. To prevent the trespasser, the owner fixed a live wire without giving any written warning. So one day what happened, a victim touched the wire while accessing the toilet and died. It was considered excessive force. So what we understand that private defense should not extend to causing death by laying a trap. The rule of proportionality is not applied in certain situations. So there are certain exceptional situations where the law gives relaxation and even causing death is justified while exercising private defense. The justification depends on the following four factors in cases of offences against human body. Number one, accused must be free from fault. That is, the situation should not be self-created. Number two, presence of imminent danger to life and apprehension of serious injury. The apprehension must be real and should not be based on imagination or speculation. Third, absence of self-mode of escape. And fourth, necessity for taking life. Killing the offender is justified as per the provision of IPC in 11 situations. So if there is an apprehension, namely of number one, death, number two, grievous hurt, number three, rape, number four, unnatural lust, 5, kidnapping, 6, confinement in circumstances that recourse to public authority is not available, 7, acid throwing case, 8, robbery, 9, housebreaking by night, 10, mischief by fire committed on any building, tent or vessel which is used for human dwelling or custody of property, and the last one, theft, mischief or trespass in a situation causing reasonable apprehension of death or grievous injury. Now the sixth limitation is private defense is not available if the public servant acts within its power. A person cannot exercise private defense if a public servant acts within his power. In fact, private defense is not available even if the act or omission of public servant is not strictly within the letter of the law, except where there is reasonable apprehension of death or grievous injury. Similarly, private defense is also not available when somebody is acting under the direction of the public servant. The rule remains the same, which is applicable for public servant. Eighth, not available to aggressor. Private defense is available only against the wrongdoer. The wrongdoer cannot claim private defense due to the act of the person who causes injury while exercising private defense. Thus, private defense on private defense is not permitted. However, if a person exceeds private defense, which is an offense, the wrongdoer can exercise private defense. Now take an example. Say Mr. X slapped Mr. Y once without any justification. The latter, while exercising private defense, may slap the former twice, which may not be considered as excessive harm. Now imagine that Mr. X gets provoked because he was slapped twice and punches Mr. Y. Mr. X cannot claim private defense because he was the aggressor. However, instead of slapping twice, imagine that Mr. Y stabs Mr. X. The latter may stab the former in the exercise of private defense because the harm is prima facie out of proportion and actually Mr. Y has committed an offense. Next exception, it is again not available for lawful act. So, in a situation, for example, where Mr. X, an officer of a court, enters the property of Mr. Y for executing an order of the court. Now, Mr. X cannot exercise private defense. Next limitations is it is also not available in case of free fight. So, free fight in the sense where two people assemble for measuring their strength and settling matter by the use of force, as both are considered aggressor. The willingness or mutual consent of the parties to harm each other is the test to determine whether the fight is free or it is not a free fight. So, it is not relevant to determine who is attacker and who is defender. Summing up, the law provides us the power to use force for defending ourselves and also for others. However, it should be used as a last resort, not as a matter of routine when we have other options such as taking the assistance of public authority. The burden of proving private defense is always on the person who claims it, and the court takes a call after analyzing all the facts and circumstances of the given case. Thank you for listening.